Welcome back to Boilers and Beyond. I'm Jordan Jones. The countdown to kickoff continues to march on as less than 3 weeks remain until Purdue and Indiana State square off inside of Ross-Ade Stadium. We continue to preview the 2024 season on the show today. It's Defense and Special Teams Day. We'll look at year 2 of this unique defensive scheme and the personnel who will be tasked with executing it. We'll see if Purdue can take a much-needed step forward in the special teams as well. If you don't already, be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be coming at you, I think, twice a week during the season. Going to throw up some polls on Twitter to see what you guys prefer. If we do one big episode or the Sunday recap show, midweek preview. Leaning towards 2 a week, though. And you'll want to be sure to follow along on Twitter, @BoilersBeyond. You can always send over questions for the show there. We'll be live tweeting every game, thoughts, news from every week. You'll want to be following there. You can also email the show, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. Love to get these loaded mailbags. We've got another really good one today to wrap this episode out with. Before we get into the defense, so far, Purdue's 2 weeks into fall camp, and there has not been a whole lot of news out of West Lafayette, and that is a great thing for Purdue. The only news that comes out of camp that is real news tends to be injuries or suspensions. Suspensions don't happen in camp as much now. The news cycle around college football has changed quite a bit. That stuff's reported on all summer long. A lot of it's injuries, and we've seen it. Notre Dame and Nebraska losing left tackles for the year. Texas and Texas A&M losing running backs this weekend. That's all pretty big stuff. Purdue has not found itself in that spot yet. You knock on wood that here in the next 3 weeks, Purdue can stay healthy and get itself to the season opener. You do read, those of us who read the camp reports, on sites of guys who aren't practicing certain days. One thing to remember as it pertains to player health right now, obviously a potential season-ending injury like we saw from Jamal Adrine last year or Garrett Miller in 2022. That's massive. That's a big blow. But for the minor bumps and bruises and the guys who are dinged up a little bit in fall camp, Purdue's in an interesting spot where it doesn't need these guys to be ready to go for week 1. Now, you want them to be ready to go. You want to have your full squad out there getting reps against Indiana State. You want to have your units become cohesive in a live bullet environment. But Purdue has a very poor opponent week 1, and then Purdue has a bye week 2. So Purdue really has an extra 2 weeks for guys to get healthy for when Purdue needs its team to be 100% when the Fighting Irish come to town. It's an interesting dynamic. It's one that I hadn't really thought of until this week. But you look at last year where Purdue needed everyone against Fresno State. Then week 2, you go to Virginia Tech. Then you have Syracuse and Wisconsin and Illinois. And Purdue didn't have a bye week till mid-October. Whereas this year, that is one hidden benefit, one that I probably failed to acknowledge on last week's podcast of that week 2 bye, is it gives you more recovery time for guys who get dinged up in fall camp. But all in all, no news so far for Purdue. That's good news, as Purdue has, 2 more weeks of fall camp before you get into game week prep for Indiana State. But the topic of today's show is the defense. We'll touch on the special teams as well. Year 2 of the airstrike defense for Ryan Walters, Kevin Kane, and company. Look, last year it was not a great defense. Purdue's defense struggled. Opponents scored 30 points a game, almost 8 yards per attempt through the air against what was largely a mediocre group of quarterbacks. Purdue did not play a great lineup of quarterbacks last year, and it still struggled. It had a good pass rush. Dylan Thieneman was great. But those two components were not enough for Purdue's defense to be as effective as it wanted to be. And it's interesting because it looks a lot different this year. And I'm going to start in the secondary because the secondary was by far Purdue's weakest position group on defense last year. It might be the strongest position group on the defense this year. On paper, it has to be the most improved area. Once Marquise Wilson went out at corner last year, the cornerback spot got really, really thin. You had Derek Rogers Jr. playing out there as a true freshman. You had Zion Steptoe, a converted wide receiver, who started a game at corner for you and played a lot down the stretch. Cam Allen didn't have a great year at the star spot, but Purdue didn't have any other options. It was a tough year for Purdue's secondary. Purdue hit the portal really hard to try to fix that. And it may have provided a couple starters for Purdue. Nyland Green, transfer from Georgia, comes in projected as the top outside corner. Massive recruit out of high school. A high 4-star, on 3 had him 50th overall nationally, but he didn't get on the field a whole lot down in Athens, which tends to happen down there. It's all elite recruits in Georgia. So that's not going to be a problem at Purdue. He's going to have plenty of opportunity to play. He should be a really good piece for Purdue this year. I'm interested to see how Purdue uses him. If he is indeed that true number one corner that Purdue hopes he is, does he always shadow the top receiver? Does he stick on the short side of the field? Time will tell with that. But if he can be a true number one corner who can take the opponent's best receiver on every snap, that's a really, really big-time addition. You also have Kendrick Breedlove, a Colorado transfer who looks like he's going to be in that star spot, the slot corner, nickelback, whatever term you want to use for it. It's where Cam Allen played last season. Breedlove was a 4-star prospect out of high school, 2 years at Ole Miss, 1 year at Colorado. Now he got out of the mess in Boulder. He's at Purdue. I'm happy for him that he's not at Colorado anymore because that's an absolute disaster. Early reviews on him are very positive. Great speed. That's a really important trait for that slot corner spot because you will, in theory, be covering a lot of quick, shifty guys. These two guys who transfer in, if they can both be legitimate quality starters for you, that's a home run in the transfer portal for a position group. It doesn't get better than that, where you're able to bring in two legit starters. You have some guys who have played ball behind them. Markevius Brown could, I would think at this point, probably projects to start at the other outside spot alongside Nyland Green, but you never know. Brown played a good amount last year, transferred in from Ole Miss. Derek Rogers Jr., as I mentioned, he played as a true freshman last year and got some good experience. He had his ups and downs, as you do as a true freshman being thrust into action, but he's gotten some reps on the field. Botros Alessandro played last year. Salim Turner Muhammad, a guy who never got on the field, transferred in from Stanford, but he's back. Lots of names there. That's going to be a massive group for Purdue. Purdue needs these guys to be hits. At safety, it's a different story because we know what Dylan Thieneman is. He had an outstanding freshman season. All-American as a true freshman. 106 total tackles is astronomical, especially for someone who lines up as deep as he does at deep safety. I will maintain that's a bit of a double-edged sword because that means a ton of plays got to him. And at times, it feels he's lined up in Delphi. He's way off the ball. So I don't know that you want him to make as many tackles, but he's a really good player. He really is. He's likely to be Purdue's next early draft pick after his junior season. Some of the pictures of like body transformation for him too. He looks a lot bigger, a lot bulkier. I'm interested to see how he looks out there because he demonstrated the ability to be a good tackler last season. He had 6 interceptions, showed some really nice instincts, some really nice ball skills. He had that pick in the opener against Fresno State where it felt like he was Ken Griffey Jr. tracking down a fly ball, and that was really impressive. He's going to have another really good year. There's that other safety spot in this defense that plays up more, not always in the box, but up closer. Sanusi Kane did that last year. Looks like that's going to be Antonio Stevens this year. A guy who has really put together a great story. You know, he had that injury in the 2020 game against Nebraska, no fans in the stands, where he had to be ambulanced off the field. And he's back. He's played a little bit the last couple of seasons, some special teams duty, played some on defense last year. He looks like he may slide into that starting spot. Something to watch here in the secondary is the true freshmen. Purdue brought in, I believe, 8 guys that are true freshmen in the secondary this year. I don't know that I see all of them redshirting. In fact, I'd be stunned if all of them redshirted. Coy Beasley, Luke Williams, Terrion Grant are some really big names. Terrion Grant's a reclass, so he's young for his age, I believe, coming in early, but this is going to be something to watch in that defensive backfield. How many of these guys are in the rotation early on, and then as the season progresses, are they beating dudes out? You're not going to beat out Thieneman. I don't think you're going to beat out Nyland Green. I want to see it. Probably not Breedlove, but we'll see. You know, can they press for time at outside corner? How are some of the safeties? You know, Damon Marable, Ty Hudkins. Where are those guys at in terms of their ability? Can they come in and play that forward safety a little bit? It's going to be interesting to see. That is the group on defense where I'm most fascinated to see the true freshmen. Moving up a unit at linebacker, keep in mind, this looks very different in Ryan Walters' scheme because sometimes, and a lot of times, there's only one linebacker on the field. O.C. Brothers is gone. He played there quite a bit over the past 2 or 3 years. But Kydron Jenkins moves to inside linebacker this year. He had 7.5 sacks last season at the edge rusher spot. He comes to inside linebacker, and as I understand, the thinking behind it is that's where he would play at the next level. If he gets an NFL shot, it would be as an inside backer. He's not big enough to be a pass rusher at the NFL level. Give the staff some credit for this. That is having your players' best interests in mind. That is, you know, you hear the term players coach quite a bit. That's an example of it. You don't see that a whole lot. I think he'll slide in well to that. Inside linebacker is not rocket science. It's one of the more replaceable positions out there, but we know he can tackle. He has played a lot of football and should have pretty good instincts. Now, from a different spot, but nonetheless, he'll still rush the passer on third downs and in some obvious passing situations. I'm curious to see what that looks like. I'm curious to see how much he actually lines up on the edge. That's going to be something to watch because he is very good as a pass rusher at the college level. You don't want to miss out on that. You have Yanni Karlaftis as well in that linebacker rotation. Burst onto the scene last year, had a nice season, finished 4th on the team in tackles. He's not his brother. He is not the star that his brother was. He doesn't need to be. That's an unrealistic expectation to put on someone. He does a fine job. He had a good year last year. He got good reps and, can bring that to the table this year. This is a good tandem with Kydron Jenkins and Yanni Karlaftis. I think you like what you have there. Now, behind them, there's not a lot of depth. Owen Davis, Winston Berglund, I believe they're the only two other inside linebackers on scholarship. Both guys are redshirt freshmen. We'll see how ready they are. This could be a situation where we find out in the opener. I think with a lot of this, we'll talk about it more in the Indiana State preview episode, but Purdue could really get a lot of guys subbed into that game and give you a little bit of a feel where guys are at. As we move up to the front line of the defense, the rush end spot is where the questions really begin for this defense. And as I said, it's a bit of the opposite from last year. Going in, this was the most known position group on the roster. Everyone knew Nick Scorton was going to have a really nice year. Everyone knew Kydron Jenkins was fairly proven, that he'd done some really nice things for you. Now, that's 17 and a half sacks you have to replace from last year's two starters. Not a single sack returns to this position group from Purdue's 2023 season. That's pretty crazy when you think about how effective Purdue's pass rush was last year. Jenkins and Scorton were the bulk of it. Corday Sidnor had a few sacks in there. Scotty Humpich might have had one. But all in all, it was a two-man show there. Will Helt is going to be the guy who benefits the most from this brand new group. He showed some flashes last year in limited snaps. He's gotten rave reviews ever since he got on campus, really. Now it's his time. Purdue has done a great job of producing defensive ends in the last 30 years or so. He is the next guy up in that. You think. You got to see it first, but if there's a next man up, it's him. He's got a big opportunity here. Who's going to be on the other side of him? I'm not sure. You have Sheeta Saleh from Boston College, often injured guy, but he's been around for a long time. CJ Madden from Georgia seems to be another one of those Georgia transfers with high upside. Trey Smith from Illinois. I would always take a note anytime Purdue brings a guy from Illinois, because Ryan Walters and Kevin Kane and a lot of those guys would have been revolved in recruiting the players to Illinois, if not coaching them there. Off the top of my head, I can't remember Trey Smith's age, but at bare minimum, they would have recruited him. You've got G-Ray Ojada from Franklin College. No clue if I said that right. But those are 4 transfers in this year that are all hoping to start across from Will Helt. You've got some interesting options there. But again, Purdue needs production from that spot. That's critical in this defense. You need corners who can hold their own in man coverage, but you need pass rushers to get to the quarterback, to get that ball out of his hands, or to sack him, because man coverage can't hold up forever. Eventually, someone comes open. And again, the concerns up front continue as you go inside. On the interior of the defensive line, this is the area for Purdue that I have the most questions about. I was a little surprised at how big of a role Isaiah Nichols and Malik Langham each played last year as grad transfers in from SEC schools. They were fine. They were fine players for you. They did exactly what you needed them to. You weren't bringing them in expecting them to be Aaron Donald, but they were fine plug-and-play guys for you. You have Cole Brevard and you have Mo Amonade back, and those guys are both at the nose tackle spot. Could they have a breakout year? Purdue would love if one of them had a big year and really announce their presence as the nose tackle on this team. They've both done some nice things, but neither have had, gigantic impacts. This is their year. From those other 2 spots on the defensive line, I have no clue. There was real excitement about Jeffrey Emba when he came in from Auburn. He didn't do a ton last year. Sometimes with transfers, it's that year 2 jump. Can that be the case for him? Joe Anderson from South Carolina has been around a couple years now. Hasn't done a whole lot. Again, it's now or never. DeMar J. Lewis has been injured a ton. Does he have anything left in the tank? Jamarius Dinkins, Chops Harkless, Joe Strickland, any of these guys up on that defensive line. Purdue's got to have guys step up from this group. And I don't know who it's going to be yet, but Purdue has to have something because this defense's name of the game. Again, rush the passer, get your guys in man coverage, but that's contingent on it being third and medium, third and long, where the offense has to throw. If the offense is playing ahead of the chains against this defense, you don't get the full dynamic ability from it. You're not getting the big plays that you need. So if Purdue can't stop the run well, then you've got some serious questions. It can't get beaten up on the defensive line. It's not going to be an elite defensive line by any means, but it has to hold its own. This is a physical schedule with a lot of physical teams. This is the biggest question mark for me on Purdue's defense. Just overall, for Purdue to get to 6 wins, and that's kind of how I preview everything for this season. Purdue's win total's at 4.5. If it wants to get to 6 and gets back to a bowl, this has to be a significantly improved defense. Purdue gave up a lot of big plays last season, and that is part of it when you play as aggressive of a style as Purdue does, but it can't give up as many big plays. And it did create some sacks, and it was fine stopping the run most of the time. The back end was just a problem. Purdue can't have that this season. And especially now that the pass rush is unlikely to produce the sack numbers it did a season ago, that production's got to be there. This defense has to be able to take advantage and get home when they have one-on-one pass rush opportunities. It has to stop the run, and that back end has to be better at limiting the opposing team through the air and then striking and creating turnovers. Year 2 in this defensive scheme, it should be better. You've got more players who theoretically fit this scheme better. Almost all these guys were selected by Walters. A lot of them transfers. Some of them were inherited. Brevard, Thieneman, kinda. Yanni Karlaftis, Jenkins, Amanade. But a lot of these guys were brought in. And Purdue needs this defense to be significantly better. After the break, we'll get into the special teams before answering your questions. This episode is brought to you by me. Yes, me. When I'm not watching sports, or more accurately, talking about them, I'm talking insurance with the people of Indiana. As an agent with Indiana Farm Bureau Insurance, I want to help you protect what you've worked hard to achieve. From home and auto to life and business insurance, I'm here to help you. Give me a call at 317-846-5861 or email me at jordan.jones@infarmbureau.com, and let's protect you from life's everyday risks. So on the special teams, Purdue really struggled in this phase last season. The kicking game was horrific. 8 for 17 on field goal attempts. That is just awful. Spencer Porath comes in as a true freshman from Brownsburg High School with at bare minimum the possibility, if not likelihood, if not expectation, of becoming the full-time kicker from day one. How ready for that is he? We'll see. There's only one way to find out, and it's when those lights come on. It's when there's a different helmet on the other side of the line of scrimmage trying to block your kicks. And we'll see what happens. Ben Freehill is still on the roster. He has experience kicking at Purdue. He's actually, I don't know how many folks realize this, Freehill's entering his 4th year at Purdue. Transferred from Oklahoma State ahead of 2021, but did mostly kickoff duty. I think he did exclusively kickoff duty until last year. Just 6 for 11, 2 misses inside 40 yards, 2 for 5 beyond 40. There's a ton of room for improvement in the kicking game. Whoever wins it, whether it's Freehill or Porath, It's got to be better than 6 for 11. I'll dismiss Julio Macias as 2 for 6 as he's gone. It's just got to be better than 6 for 11. In the punting game, one Australian replaces another. Keelan Crimmins comes in from Mississippi State to swap in for Jack Ansell. Ansell just never put it all together. Lots of ups and downs, a lot of very inconsistent, not a big leg, and probably wasn't finesse enough to get away with not having a big leg. Purdue will hope that this is an upgrade. The numbers looked fairly similar to what Ansell did in Crimmins' only year at Mississippi State. He did force a lot of fair catches, and that's good. Don't mess around with returns. But distance needs to improve. He's got to stretch that out a little bit. We'll see what the punting game looks like. And I have no clue what to expect from the return game. It is becoming almost a lost art in the sport. You know, I've been watching a little bit of the NFL preseason, and you see it's almost gimmicky stuff they've done to drum up the return game. But it is true. You don't see it a ton. The kickoff return streak finally ended last year. Tyrone Tracy took one to the house against Fresno State. That was Purdue's first kick return touchdown since 2013. Purdue still hasn't returned a punt for a touchdown since back in 2009 when Aaron Valentine did it. There's a name for you. But lots of options here. We don't know who's going to be the return man for either kicks or punts. But yeah, we'll see. I don't feel good enough to make a prediction on really anything related to the return game for Purdue, other than the fact that you just can't let it hurt you. There's, to some degree, there's nothing wrong with just taking fair catches and moving on, but you can't let this hurt you. You can't have fumbles. You can't have costly mistakes. Got to have things buttoned up pretty well. Next week, before we get in the Q&A, next week's going to be the offensive preview. I'm going to record that early. I'm going to record that Thursday night this week to post next Monday. I'll be out of town for the weekend. Start sending in those questions about the offense. You can email them to me, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com, or you can tweet them to me, DM them to me, @boilersbeyond. However you want to do it. Would love to get a bunch of questions in here. We had a great mailbag last week, and we have another really good one this week. Thank you to everyone who sends these in. And the first question is one I had kind of forgotten about. What has Purdue done to address opposing quarterbacks scrambling? Will they just trust in personnel changes and better execution? I had really kind of forgotten about this. Or early on last year, yeah, Purdue was awful against running quarterbacks. Garrett Schrader from Syracuse tore him apart. Tanner Mordecai from Wisconsin did well, as I recall. Purdue's scheme, just on paper, it does make this a bit of a liability because you have two outside corners. If we're just talking base 11 personnel on the offensive side, you have your star guy dropped into man coverage. You're typically rushing 5. You have Thieneman playing way back there. That just leaves your inside backer and the other safety to be rovers or spies. So it does that is a potential weakness there. Kydron Jenkins should be pretty good. I would think he's got decent instincts there. Yanni Karlaftis got some experience too. But yeah, I mean, this is going to get tested early too. Notre Dame, Riley Leonard, he can really move. I don't know how many running quarterbacks Purdue's going to see this year. I'm going through the schedule in my head, and I don't know that Oregon State really has that, and the Goldbrinson guy. Tyler Van Dyke at Wisconsin, no. Altmaier at Illinois, Yeah, I mean, there aren't a ton, but it's something you've got to be better at, because if you can't do it, then quarterbacks who can't do it are going to be able to do it on you. So we'll see what that looks like. But yeah, an area Purdue has to clean up. You're right. That's a good call. What is the ceiling for Nyland Green? Do you see him taking the number one receiver every game? Look, I think the ceiling's quite high. You just look at that rating coming out of high school. And I know it's a very imperfect system, but all in all, they do a pretty good job at evaluating players out of high school. Purdue needs Nyland Green to flirt with that potential of being an elite player. The defense requires it, and if he's going to be that number one corner, he needs to be really good. I'll be interested to see what they do with him. You know, you'll remember a few years back when Corey Trice was Purdue's unquestioned number one corner, and they just kept him on one side of the field, on the short side of the field. Purdue played more zone then. I don't know that I see that happening this year. I would guess Nyland Green shadows that top receiver, but we'll see what the separation's like, too, between him and the other guys. That's going to be interesting to see. Ranking the defensive positions, what do you think is Purdue's best unit and what is Purdue's weakest unit? Well, it's interesting. I think linebacker, the inside backer spot with Jenkins and Karlaftis is probably your most proven. I like the secondary the most because there's some depth there. You have more guys who have played football that are capable of going out there. And the defensive front, that scares me. I don't feel good about that at all. That's going to be something to monitor. Do you see any true freshmen on the defensive side of the ball getting playing time and or starting? Well, I mean, the majority of these guys are going to redshirt. The vast majority. If they don't, something crazy happened. Either all of these guys are 18, 19 years old and are better than 21 and 22-year-olds. Maybe all the starters got hurt, a combination thereof. But if these guys are all playing a bunch, this season did not go how Purdue envisioned. We've seen this before where Purdue had young guys loaded up on the defensive side of the ball. They weren't all true freshmen, but George Karlaftis, Jalen Graham, Corey Trice, Jack Sullivan, Branson Dean, those guys all played a ton in 2019, probably before they were ready. Lawrence Johnson in there too. Those guys played a ton. And it didn't help Purdue that year, but it paid off in 2021 and 2022 when Purdue won 17 games in 2 years. I think the secondary is the spot where true freshmen could break through. There's some high-end talent back there, but again, that's a fairly deep area of the defense too. I don't know what to expect there. How much does Thieneman's potential increase if Purdue's corners are able to play man coverage effectively? Listener says last season it felt like he had to line up in Muncie in order to stop the deep ball. Yeah, I mean, it would help a lot if Purdue's corners are capable of playing man coverage more effectively. I don't expect Thieneman to line up a whole lot closer to the line of scrimmage. That's kind of a staple of this Ryan Walters defense, is he wants to have someone back there playing center field. That's part of the scheme. If the corners are better, I think it gives you, a little more of an idea of where the ball is going to go before each play, or where Thieneman needs to think he's going to go. But it's a read and react type of deal. When you're playing that far off, you're seeing how things progress and where you need to go. I think in general, just if fewer plays get to him, that's great. Less tackles he has to make, keep him healthier. Not that he was, in too bad a shape last year, but yeah, he's an important piece. Purdue's got to have him playing at a high level. A couple more Thieneman questions here. Can Thieneman become a first or second team All-American? He has the potential. I think he needs big interception numbers again. The stats have to be there. This isn't going to be a situation where he's such an eraser that teams don't throw near him or put the ball near him and he gets the national praise for it. I don't think Purdue's going to be in the limelight enough for that, but he's got opportunities. Can you have a big game against Notre Dame, against Oregon, against Ohio State that'll have a lot of eyeballs on it? He's on the radar for people who vote on these things. You look at some of the preseason picks and the freshman-specific awards that he won last season. He's on people's eyes, but we're going to have to see what things look like for him this season in terms of if he can do that. Can Thieneman get to 10 picks? That seems pretty high. That's a ton of interceptions. I looked this up out of curiosity. Per College Football Reference, only 24 players have had 10-plus interceptions in a season in FBS history. That's a pretty ambitious target. He had 6 last season. That would be a big, big increase. Because remember, he had 2 in the bucket game. He had 1 in the season opener. So a 10-game stretch, just 3 picks. And that's hard to do. I'm going to say no on that. Who will be the MVP of this year's defense besides Dylan Thieneman? I think Kydron Jenkins is in that mix. I'm really intrigued to see how much he rushes the passer. We've talked about Nyland Green a lot. If he is that true number 1 corner, it's hard to get more valuable than that. If we're just going true value in most valuable player. How about Will Helt, maybe? I don't know. That would be a really big jump for him. But if he makes it, boy, what a year for him. I'm not going to rule it out, but that seems like a big ask. And then to close out, is there a statistic from last year's defense that stands out as needing to improve drastically in order to see success on the defensive side of the ball this year? Yeah. We talked about it in the open a little bit. 8 yards per attempt for Purdue's opponents last year through the air. That's rough. That's really rough. That's a lot. Purdue's opponents just moved the ball too easily through the air. It wasn't an insane completion percentage, but opponents hit too many big plays. Purdue played too many bad quarterbacks to give up 241 yards per game through the air. It's just got to improve there. Very basic level. If you give up 30 a game again, you're in danger. That's not going to cut it. I think Purdue needs to force more turnovers. Just 10 interceptions last year. I think you'd need more than that. 10 interceptions and 8 fumbles recovered. So 18 turnovers in 12 games. I think you want to see that increase. 24 sacks was pretty good, but you lose 17 and a half of them in Scorton and Jenkins from the edge rusher spot. There are a lot of areas here. And also just the eye test. I know I've said this a lot this year, but even in the Minnesota game where Purdue won, Minnesota went down the field in 5 plays on its first drive and scored. You can't be doing that stuff. I don't think Purdue will. I do think this defense is notably improved, but the eye test is going to go a long way here too. As I mentioned earlier, next week it's time to do this same thing, but the offense. Start sending in questions about Purdue's offense, about Graham Harrell in year 2, Hudson Card in year 2. You can send those to me on Twitter @BoilersBeyond, or you can email the show, boilersandbeyondpod@gmail.com. That's all I've got for you today. Thank you guys for spending your time with me. When we talk again, we'll be less than 2 weeks away from kickoff. There will be college football played that week with week 0. And guys, the best time of the year is pretty much back. It is almost there. Enjoy the week. I will talk to you next week. Take care.